During these times of COVID-19 lockdown, obviously we can't go out videoing cars and things like that. They can't even meet up as a group, apart from on WhatsApp and things like that. So I set the guys a bit of a challenge. Which isn't much of a challenge really, but to look at the cars that we've filmed, that they've worked on, things like that. Find out what they, tell us what their favourite ones were. And also what their least favourite one was. And since I've set the challenge, the only thing that's fair is if I do it myself as well. So, here are my favourite and not so favourite cars. I'll start off with probably the least liked but most fun vehicle we've done. And I strongly suspect that all of us are going to say the same thing here. And that's the VW Transporter campervan, the T4 campervan. Which I will say was an experience to drive. There were numerous problems with it. I spoke to the owner not long ago. He's my cousin. And it is still going, but has actually got worse since we filmed it. Various problems with the engine, the passenger side door no longer opening from the outside. So getting in and out the car is a round trip, effectively. Anyhow, it was fun to do, though, because it was like a comedy of errors. Every time we looked around for something that was positive, something negative would jump out. The noise insulation was terrible. It was pretty comfortable in the seats, to be fair, but that's about it. There wasn't much we could actually say that was really, really good.
But, well, we've said it now, but it has leaked in.
And there's
even a tube of sealant down back gear stick.
There is.
There we go, look, I knew I didn't imagine it. There's a tube of sealant. Ready with the gun as well, ready to use.
Yep. So next time it rains.
I mean, how many people drive around with a vehicle where they've got to take their own, and they will advertise here, Unibond roof sealant?
It was a normally aspirated diesel, and it was just appalling. I'm sorry, but it just was. Oh god, this is embarrassing. There's a bus next to me now, and I suspect the bus will be able to pull away faster than me. Definitely some interesting features. Armrests, at least. But that gets in the way of the handbrake. Oh no, no, I'm actually pulling away from the bus. The bus! I didn't think that happened. Having said that, though, it gave us a lot of fun on the day. It was an enjoyable vehicle to film. And there are a few that we've had so much fun. In terms of falling about laughing, really, because of the car. I mean, it's still an enjoyable experience when we're filming these cars, but that was something that was just up and above everything else. It was beyond funny when we're actually filming a lot of the things, especially when Craig managed to get himself stuck inside the car. Many polar bears were harmed during that filming. But moving on, I think the other one that we liked, but again was quite funny, was the Peugeot 205. GTI. Now, it was only a 1.6, but having said that, the 1.9 wasn't much more powerful anyway with the engines of those days. You'd have had to have gone up to like 2.5 to get a real kick out of it, or added a turbo. And it was immaculate. It was in fantastic condition. But one thing that you notice is that there was a lot of condensation inside the car because it was raining at the time, and there's probably a bit of a leak in the sunroof as well, because the guttering around the sunroof was full of water. And there's a point when you see the trailing shots. Martin and Craig are sat in my car driving ahead with the camera mounted on the boot, and I'm driving the 205 up the road and following them. And they turned around they turned to a little turn off to turn around, and you sort of see me turn in and then stop. Not for any reason to do with their car, well, my car, and their driving. It was literally because the water had come through in the guttering, swirled across to the handle, the winding handle for the actual sunroof, and poured straight onto my lap. It was cold, it was wet, it wasn't fun just at that particular moment. So when we finally got back to NK and got parked up and I got out of the car, I literally looked as if I'd wet myself. And it was just the water from the sunroof. You can literally just see me stop the car as I just saw this water running down in front of me. And then I realised where it was going. Cold, wet, not nice. But the car itself, brilliant fun. Somebody's bought it and doesn't live too far away from Craig because he sees that car regular passing by. So if you're watching this and you own that car, let us know what you've done, how you're finding it, are you enjoying it, was it a worthwhile buy for you? Because it's a classic. It's bound to increase in value now. The 1.9s are certainly rocketing in value, and the 1.6s aren't that far behind. So it'd be really good to hear from you if you've got that car. Moving on, I think one thing I'll bring up is an experience, and it was a disappointment, and that was the 2018 Fleetwood Festival of Transport. We did a couple of things that year. We went to the Harrogate MG show out at Paley Bridge, and we also did the Fleetwood Festival of Transport for 2018, and we'd been a couple of years on the trot anyway. A lot of the footage we did for the SD1, which will be coming up later, we filmed some of that at Fleetwood, and it had been a couple of good years. I'd shown my MGTF there, I'd shown my Rover 75 there, and they were generally pretty good years, but you could sort of see it trailing down a bit. So 2018, I wasn't going to show a car, we were just going to go and film. And a friend of mine, Andy Sutton, took us. So thank you for that, Andy, if you're watching this. And it was a letdown. There was more stalls than there were cars. And it just wasn't a very good experience. Didn't even bother finding out about last year's, which is 2019 one. And, it just seems to have gone a little bit down. So it was a bit of a letdown from when we first showed there back in 2014, I think it was, when I first went with the MG Rover Owners Club. I mean, that was a brilliant record-breaking year. There was the brilliant weather, there was thousands of people. And we went back when we were looking at doing myself and somebody else, we were looking at doing a pilot's recording for a TV program, and we got shots of crowds and massive crowds, and then we look at it in 2018 when we went, and it was a complete contrast. There was not as many cars. A lot of the groups that used to show up with masses of cars showed up with 2 or 3. It just wasn't the same. blooming bit of air. But that was probably the biggest disappointment. But the 2018 Harrogate show, which we went to, brilliant fun. Moving on from that, let's get on to some of the cars that we've enjoyed. So, one of the ones I really liked was the Focus, the Mark III Focus ST. Because we got to drive around in that, and it was Martin's as well. And it was really good fun to do. Got some pretty good shots on there. But of course, we were just starting out, so we were still learning as we were going along. So there's a lot of things on there. If I was doing it again, I would do a little bit differently. But it was a good shoot to do. I enjoyed that shoot a lot. And even though there was little things building up in the background, which I sort of knew things weren't going to work out there. But that's another story for another time. It was a fantastic car to drive, though, and thank you, Martin, for letting us actually do that. It was a really good day. It was warm. The roads were pretty quiet, but the one thing we found as well was we'd get set up with filming, and it'd be nice and quiet, and then suddenly there'd be more and more cars going past as the people noticed the cameras and stuff like that. So it got more difficult to film, so we'd have to shift a location and go somewhere else. But it was good fun to do. We learned a lot. Well, I learned a lot in doing that one. And yeah, it was good fun. I think, what else? Another one I really, really liked was the Marcos. And it's not often you get to see a Marcos. And even when you see them on YouTube, you don't get to see them in the ways that we filmed this one. And it was a really, really good experience. I've never sat in a Marcos before. And I can honestly say the seats are brilliant. But they don't move. Those are fixed. So everything effectively, like the steering and stuff like that, moves around you. So you adjust the pedals with a little sort of twisty knob thing to bring them closer to you, but the seats themselves don't move. And you've got to remember that the first of these, when they first came out, were made of wood. And this one was a chassis, a steel chassis, but the chassis at some point had been galvanised. So the chassis was probably going to outlast everything else. And in that respect, it's probably unique. And the guy who's bought it now, it's been shipped out of the country now. The guy who bought it probably realised what he was buying when he saw the galvanised chassis. And it was certainly a really good buy for him. If I'd have had the money, I'd have bought that car straight off. But he's a bit of an enthusiast, the guy who's bought the car, and he's going to restore it to the proper dash and things like that, because Gary did mention he put new dials on and stuff like that. And this guy's going to basically restore it back to what it was. Not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but each to their own. So he's restoring the car as close to original as possible. But there is some possible Marcos news coming up later, depending on how all this COVID-19 stuff works out. That's all I'm going to say on that one for now. Really good car to film, though. I mean, it was Gary's suggestion going up to where we did to film it. We got some pretty good shots on there. It's possibly a location I'd use again, but it is a bit of a problem getting out there. That's the only thing. And there was a point when I did actually have a various bits in the boot that Gary put in just in case we broke down, so I could actually tow the car if need be. But everything works. The car itself was pretty much flawless. The one time it did fail to start was when Gary flicked the wrong switch, because he hadn't put any identification on any of the switches. and flicked the wrong ones and didn't actually activate the fuel pumps, so I wonder why his car wouldn't start. But that's by the by. We also did Gary's Mercedes, his 300D, and that is a really nice car as well. And absolutely loved filming that one. Really good fun to do. And that 300D is pretty much immaculate. And it was the last of its kind as well. It was the last of the Mercedes where everything was vacuum operated, and things started to go electric after that. So things like the central locking was vacuum operated. The headlamp adjusters were vacuum operated, all off of a pump that was attached to the engine. The fuel injectors were mechanically operated, not electrically operated. And there's only a couple of ECUs in there, one of them being for the ABS, and I think there's another one in there as well. But where you'd expect it to be electrically operated, it's all mechanical. The thing that we found really weird was the heater adjustments, which were potentiometers. So where you'd expect a mechanical adjustment, it was electrical. So it's a little bit strange and quirky in that respect, but it was a really, really nice car to actually film. And they're built like tanks. You see them all over the place. They're still being used today in Africa and places like that, because they're so reliable, they're so solidly built. They just won't break down unless you really, really abuse them. But yeah, that was a really nice car to film, and enjoyed that thoroughly. But my all-time favourite is the Rover SD1. Now, I used to watch this car as a kid, and I'd seen it on rally circuits and things like that back in the early to mid-80s, and loved it. I've always loved the sort of look and the shape of the SD1. I've owned two of them myself, and I can't really fault the cars. They are, if they're looked after well, they are brilliant. But this one, even though it was a rally car, and you expect a bit of abuse as a rally car, had actually been chopped, because not long after it was the 1984 Rally Championship winner for the Scottish National Rally Championship, it was sold on to one driver who raced it around a bit, and it was sold on to another one who struggled with the fact that the fuel was effectively in a bag in the boot and would shift. And as a result, the centre of gravity would shift and the various things would move around, and he found it difficult to control. And on one occasion, literally sent it end over end into a ditch, which buckled the chassis. So he decided to have it chopped, so the wheelbase was more the size of a Ford Escort at the time, which kind of spoilt the car, really. But I think it was Ewan Piper who did that. And when it was found by its current owner, it was in a bit of a sorry state. Now, the thing that's made it stand out was it was originally built for the Dakar Rally, and it had dual shock suspension at the back, both sides at the back. So it was a pretty distinctive car, especially out of the Rover Rally fleet, because it was the only one that had those. So when it showed up, it was, the current owner went to look at it, got the VIN number and things like that, checked it with the driver who won in 1984, and Ken Wood, who won in that car, and along with David Brown. No, it wasn't. It was Peter Brown. And anyway, they won in that year, and it was the correct car. It was the same car. So it was bought. It was then restored back to its full size, its normal size, and really, really well looked after by its current owner. Watch the video. It's a brilliant story. I mean, we followed it from the point of roughly when it was originally built, through its winning years, and what happened to it afterwards. And there's a really nice bit added at the end where the drivers who won in that car back in 1984 were reunited with it and actually drove it round again in a rally circuit up in Scotland, as the car was there in the Scottish Motor Museum at the time. Brilliant little story, really good to do. I can't sort of say much more on that one. It was fantastic to do. It was fantastic to research. The number of things that I dug up were amazing. The problem was, of course, there's only so much time that you could put in, and I'd really sort of like to follow up on that at some point. I do know the owner, and I do know where the car is now. So there's a possibility I might see if I can do a follow-up on that once all this COVID-19 stuff goes away. And yeah, that's my favourite list. So go and have a look at those videos, see what you think of them. If you've got some ideas on which videos you like, feel free to drop us a line. Feel free to comment. Tell us about it. Tell us what you like, what you don't like, and things like that. So, that's my selection done.
Just move them bolts, move it in or out wherever you want to.